This episode of the Multiamory podcast is brought to you by Quip, modern oral care delivered. For one free refill with your first order, go to tryquip.com/multiamory.
For the people that value making restitution, that means that in order for an apology to be sincere, the person who is apologizing should justify their actions and also talk about what they're going to do to make it up to you, essentially. So asking things like, just straight up, what can I do to make it up to you? Or I'll compensate you. I mean, maybe that's weird in a romantic relationship, but it's like if a friend comes over and breaks something accidentally, that it's like, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I'll compensate you the cost of your precious moments collection. I don't know. That was the first thing that came to mind.
Yeah, that's great. I love it.
If you're happy with the same old ways of dating,
If you enjoy sucking at communication,
And you have no desire to improve your romantic life, then our podcast might not be for you.
but if you want some out-of-the-box ideas to deepen your current relationships,
broaden your sexual horizons,
develop a better understanding of yourself,
or learn more about non-monogamy,
Then you've come to the right place. I'm Jase,
I'm Emily.
and I'm Dedeker.
and this is the Multiamory podcast.
Songs I know I did, forcing me to form myself to fit.
On this episode of the Multiamory podcast, we're talking about the 5 apology languages.
And it's with our old friend, God-doctor Gary Chapman.
Yes, you may recall that episode 80, which seems so long ago now.
It's been 200 centuries by now.
200 centuries ago, yes. That we did an episode about the 5 love languages, which is something that most of you have probably heard of before, and it was created by a PhD of religious studies named
A God doctor.
Gary Chapman. We've nicknamed him God-doctor Gary Chapman. And what are the love languages? Do you want to recap that for us?
Yeah, love language theory is this idea that everybody gives and receives affection, and they have a particular preference in how they give and receive affection. And it's almost like speaking your own particular language. And so those particular ways, good old God-doctor Gary Chapman broke down into 5 categories. Acts of service, so as in like doing things for your partner, taking care of your partner in some way. Quality time,
Which is dedicated one-on-one time.
Good one-on-one time. Words of affirmation, which is, verbal affection towards your partner. Physical touch, that
Doesn't have to be
doesn't
sexual.
have to be sexual, but hugging, kissing, petting, cuddling, all those things, and gift giving,
Yes.
which is pretty self-explanatory. And so usually everyone is going to appreciate receiving affection in all of the 5 love languages. Usually everybody appreciates a mix of these things. However, you will find that there's probably 1 or maybe 2 that are a little bit more dominant for you than the other as far as what really, I guess, lands for you when a partner expresses it to you. For instance, like my top 2 are acts of service and words of affirmation.
And my top 2 were words of affirmation and touch.
Yeah.
So it worked out nicely that for the 2 of us, words of affirmation was in both of our top 2.
Right.
And we're fairly close, so we have that one in common. Whereas touch versus acts of service, by knowing that about the other person, it not only helps you to express your love for them in a way that they're going to receive well, but also helps you to understand if you feel like my partner's not expressing enough affection for me, if you stop and think, oh, actually, maybe they're just doing it in their love language,
Right.
so it's not coming through.
Yeah.
I found for me personally on both sides of that, even just with family members, understanding what their love languages helps also to receive affection from them, even if it might seem to you like they're not showing it the way
Right.
that you would.
Right. So, the love language theory, it's not perfect. It doesn't necessarily going to apply to everybody in all situations, but we found it is a really excellent tool to at least start a conversation with your partners.
Yes.
It can be fun. They set up a little quiz. You can take the assessment.
And it's free to do that online.
Free
You don't have to buy the book.
Yeah, and it's a good starting point to, figure out from your partners, like, what is your love language or what are your strong love languages? Oh, that's so interesting. And so that like, oh, maybe I should try employing more gift giving because that seems to land with my partner. Anyway, you get the gist. So,
yes. So if you want to hear more about that, go back to episode 80.
Yeah.
Because today we're talking about something else.
Yeah. So God-doctor Gary Chapman also came up with an apology language theory. And kind of the same thing applies. The idea that you want to hear particular forms of apology when somebody has done something wrong to you that's going to land more than if they phrase it a different way or if they use a different tactic.
Yes.
And same thing, that you're going to default to apologizing in a particular way that may not land with your partner also.
Right. And that, again, like the love languages, I found that in reading through these different types of apology language, all of them, it's like, yeah, of course I want that. Yes, that makes a lot of sense. I want that too. But by doing the quiz and by looking into them a little bit more, you get a sense of which ones are the ones that matter most to you. And I've also found that in assessing this, it's also helped me to realize ones that I haven't gotten as much of in my life are often the ones that I put more importance on because they feel a little bit more significant. I was actually just reading an article about the word sorry, just in general. And in the article, and this is something I've read other places as well, but essentially they're saying that the word sorry itself has sorry. Now the word sounds weird to me. That the word sorry itself has lost its original meaning a little bit. That now we use sorry for sorry I bumped into you, or sorry my bag was on your seat, or sorry I didn't see you there, or sorry can I ask a favor, right? It's gotten this whole range of much more casual meanings and doesn't have as much of the meaning of I'm sorry I've made a horrible mistake, can you please forgive me for this, I'm gonna repent for this, right? Like this more serious meaning, which I actually think is why acknowledging the importance of apology language is really important, because just saying I'm sorry doesn't have that gravity to it.
Right.
And if it's something like I bumped into you, then sure, sorry is fine. But this is about bigger things.
Right.
This is something much bigger, much more upsetting, something hurtful that's happened if you actually want to repair this relationship. These are ways that you can phrase those apologies to get the maximum impact for them, and so they actually matter.
Right. So in the same way, you can take an assessment online for free to figure out what your apology language is. And I'll be honest, I've tried to take it multiple times in the past and haven't gotten through it because it's not as uplifting as the love languages one is.
Right.
Because it's all about putting yourself in hypothetical situations where people have wronged you or hurt your feelings in some way.
Yes.
So it's a little bit more of a downer. And so I tried many times to get through it, and then I never ended up getting through it. However, Jase and I, when we had our last scrum last month, it actually came up, like, because we were having an argument about something not at all related, and I forget how we came to it, but we realized that, like, basically the way that one of us was apologizing was not landing at all with the other person, and vice versa, that while both of us would feel like, oh no, I've apologized, I've made amends, like I've tried to fix this, I've said I'm sorry, but that the other person basically did not pick up on that at all. And that's when we realized, like, oh, maybe there is something about this apology language thing. And that was one of our action points from our scrum, which if you don't know what we're talking about, go listen to episode 97 to learn more about scrumming in your relationship. So that was an action point in our scrum that we said, hey, let's go and both take this apology language assessment and then compare results and see, you know, if that gives us any clues that would help us figure this out in the future.
Yes. So I've definitely, looking back now, here's the pattern that I would say to look out for that might indicate that you're having a problem with this apology language. And it's a situation where something happened at one point. It could be big or small, and one person still is holding on to it, saying, I just wish you actually felt sorry for it, or I wish you had actually apologized for it. And, you know, I've been waiting for a real apology. And the other person says, what are you talking about? I've apologized 1,000,000 times and it never seems to stick. Like, you ignore it or you don't care. That's not actually what you want. What's the problem? And this is something that, looking back, this has happened a number of times.
Oh yeah, it's happened in many of my relationships.
On either side at different times.
Yeah.
And so this was kind of a cool realization to go, oh yeah, there's someone who's codified this a little bit and written about it. Right.
So before we step into explaining the 5 different apology languages, I'm going to start out by saying we are very sorry to all of our listeners because Emily's not here for this particular episode.
And we know that her voice is the real reason why
you all
tune
come
in. That's why
and
I
listen
keep
to us.
doing this. I don't know why I'm here this week.
Yeah, Emily just had her wisdom teeth out, and
As funny as it would be to have, her
a
on
drugged
the
up
show.
Emily on the show, we're not going to do that to her. If you are part of our private patron-only Facebook group, you would see that she posted a picture of herself,
Yes.
all chipmunked, and that freaking brat, she still looks like adorable,
Yes.
even with her face all swollen up.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's where she is this week. So
Yes. Hope you get better quickly, Emily.
Okay. All right. So what's our first one here?
All right. So our first one is expressing regret. So a lot of these are going to sound a little bit similar to each other.
Yeah, there's some overlap.
Especially at first. And so what we try to do is from the longer descriptions that God-doctor Gary Chapman has on his website, we tried to get down to what are the core differentiating parts of each of these to make it a little more digestible. So expressing regret. The key here is that it focuses on an emotional hurt. It's an admission of guilt and shame for causing pain to another person, right? It's I wish I had done it differently. I wish I could go back in time and change it. I wish I'd said that a different way.
Yeah.
Right? There's a regret of not just, oh, I hurt you, but also I wish I could have done it differently.
Right.
And
right.
that for this one, and for people who this is their key language, that's the part of it that's very important.
I see.
Is that by saying, I wish I had done something different or I feel regret about it, is the way that you indicate you're actually sorry.
Yeah, and that you actually feel bad about the actions that you took.
Right.
Yeah.
To these people, it means that you take it seriously also. It means that this is something that you're not just taking lightly and trying to... you're like, oh, I'm sorry, but if I'd had to do it again, I'd do it again, right?
Yeah.
That's sort of the key
Yeah.
difference here is saying, yes, I really genuinely...
Like, I genuinely regret hurting you. I genuinely regret doing something that would have hurt you or upset you, something like that.
Because I think that part of this is also by showing that you regret something that you did will also indicate to these people that you're not going to do it again.
Right.
That it is something that you actually actively want to change. And I think that this is an interesting thing to look at as a commonality between all these different apology languages, is that all of them have a component of expressing sincerity. Sincerity,
yeah.
I can't talk today, apparently. Sincerity in truly, feeling bad and apologizing for it. And then also a promise that things are going to be better in the future. But they all go about saying those things differently, in slightly different ways.
It's very subtle. It's not quite as cut and dry as the love languages, where it's like clearly these are very different from each other.
Giving a gift and spending time are different.
Yeah, these are much more subtle. But but now that we've kind of looked into them more, it really has opened up my eyes to like, wow, like this totally makes sense. This makes sense of a lot of situations and like arguments I've had in past relationships. So
that first one was expressing regret.
Yeah.
Do you want to take us to the second one?
Yeah, moving on to number 2 is accepting responsibility. So for some people, the most important thing for them to hear is for the person they're arguing with to say, I was wrong. And so that means that the other person accepts responsibility for their actions specifically and admitting fault, admitting that they did something wrong. And that doesn't mean that it has to be, oh, it's all my fault or I'm the one who did everything wrong, but acknowledging your own part of the blame or your own part of things going wrong. So things like even just straight up saying, yes, I know I was wrong, or I know that my actions or these specific actions were responsible for causing this to happen, or I made a mistake.
And now I need to interject here because I think that for someone that this is an important apology language for them, I think those people are going to be more sensitive to someone apologizing for like, well, I'm kind of sorry for these sorts of things, but I'm not willing to take full responsibility. I just want to be aware that that's something.
Okay, well, I'm going to counter interject on you, and I'm going to give some spoiler alert.
Okay.
This one is my strongest one after taking the assessment.
I see.
So speaking as somebody where this really resonates with me, at least the way that I personally feel is that I don't need my partner to say, you were right, I was wrong. Like, I don't need my partner to say, yes, I'm the one who did everything bad. I'm the only person who did something bad here. It's I don't know, because when I think about it, it's like when I'm in an argument and if both of us are able to be like, I was wrong. If both of us are able to admit to our part in it,
Okay.
that feels okay to me. Like, I don't need it to be a one-sided thing. But that's just me. Some people may be
Interesting.
more sensitive to some people may interpret that as trying to like dodge the blame or try to not genuinely apologize or whatever.
Right.
But to me, that's not the case.
Maybe it's more that they would be more sensitive to this not being totally genuine, which I think a lot of times can come
Yeah.
along with that. Well, I'm willing to apologize for this little bit, but
Right,
it's still
right.
mostly you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes
Yeah.
sense.
And really that's true with all of these, is about
Yeah,
being sincere
yeah,
about
of
them,
course.
both in your body language and also the way you're, the
way you're speaking
words
about
that you're
it,
saying, the way
yes.
you're speaking, all
Yeah.
of that.
Yeah, because we've all gotten that bullshit apology of like, well, I'm sorry that you got upset over this.
Right.
Or
That's not, I'm sorry for what I
that
did.
this is what you feel. I'm sorry that you felt upset. Like, I'm
Right.
sorry that, we've all gotten that. And to be
Yeah.
honest, I've used that bullshit apology in the past too.
Sure.
So,
Well, and that is part of all of these as well. That these apology languages are about real apologies that you actually mean. And we'll get into this a little bit more in some of the other apology languages as well. But this idea of there are certain things that are hard for us to take responsibility for because we've been culturally taught that you should only really accept responsibility for something that you feel like was morally wrong, as
Right.
opposed to just something that hurt
something that hurt
somebody.
yeah.
Right. This thing of, you were hurt by this thing I did, I wish I could do it differently. It didn't mean that I intended to hurt you,
Yeah.
but that you can still
You
apologize.
can still take ownership of it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Before we go on to the next three, though, we want to take a quick moment to talk about our Patreon, which we mentioned earlier. That in the Patreon group, Emily shared a picture of herself with her puffy
With her
cheeks
chipmunk
after her
cheeks.
wisdom teeth surgery. But Patreon is an amazing service that helps people to support creators who are creating content that they love. Hopefully you love this podcast. Hopefully you're getting
Let's hope
something
so.
out
Let's
of
hope
it.
that's why you're listening to us.
If you are, the best possible way that you can support us is to become a patron on Patreon. If you go to Patreon, patreon.com/multiamory, you can pledge a certain amount of money every month that you want to give to support this show. That helps us to keep going. It helps us to add new features. Like, for example, when we hit our next goal of $1,500, we're going to start having transcriptions of all of our episodes, which will make them easier to search, easier to
Right.
find quotes that you wanted
Much
from
easier to
them.
share.
Easier to
Yeah.
share. Exactly. We're really excited about that, and we're so close to hitting that goal. So if you've been considering becoming a patron, now would be an awesome time to do it to help us get those transcripts out there. Also, as a thank you for being a patron at the $5 a month level and up, we have a private Facebook group, which is the one where Emily posted her wisdom teeth picture. And also people seek advice, people share experiences that they're having. And it's a great way to get real experiences and real advice, or just real sympathy,
Support,
and
sympathy,
support
encouragement.
from people who've been through things similar to you.
Yeah.
Even if you don't share an entire life experience with us or with other people that you can talk to about polyamory, this is a group where you can probably find people
Right.
who have those different experiences, perhaps being older or younger, or being in a different country, or being different genders or
Different gender, different
sexualities,
sexuality, yeah.
having kids or not, all those sorts of things. It's been a really cool community for people to get to connect and kind of broaden the sphere of who you can get advice from
Right.
and just support.
Yeah.
Another thing that you can do if you don't want to spend the monies on Patreon.
You can also go to iTunes or Stitcher and just leave us a review. It shouldn't take you that long, probably less than 2 minutes. But the thing is that the reviews really do help us a lot. It helps us to show up higher in search results. It helps more people to listen to the podcast. It helps us to broaden our audience. And it helps us also know whether we're on the right track or not, basically. So, if you just want to take a little bit of time and just leave us a review, you can talk about what do you like about the show? What would you want to see on the show? Just to let us know how we're doing and to let other people know who are considering listening that they should give us a listen.
Yeah, and the positive feedback that we get and that we have gotten in the past does actually influence the direction that our show takes.
Right.
If people express, "Oh, I really love all the episodes they do on God-doctor Gary Chapman," we know that
There's
that's
more
something
where that comes from.
right, or whatever it is. So I specifically like that. they share personal stories, or, oh, I really like when they do episodes with guest scientists, or right, whatever it is, that kind of feedback really helps us to shape this show and know what things matter to you and are worth writing about. So please take a moment and do that. And then lastly, our sponsor for this episode is Quip. Quip is a company that makes super awesome oral care products like toothbrushes and toothpastes and things like that. I have a Quip toothbrush. Emily has one. I freaking love it. It feels so good in my mouth. I know I've said that before. They come in cool colors, and the best part for me is that it's really easily portable. And I'd actually been looking into getting one before they became a sponsor of our show. So I was really excited to get them as a sponsor because I'd already been considering buying one because a friend had shared this with me at work. But they're really nice and portable, and it's a way to have an electric toothbrush that you can travel with it's not this huge giant thing, and you don't need a charging base for it. It just uses a quadruple A battery. I didn't even know those were a thing.
Whoa, wait, hang on. A quadruple A battery?
Yeah, it's like a smaller than a triple A.
That's crazy.
Yeah, quadruple A battery.
I don't know if I believe you.
I know, right?
You're gonna have to show me.
You got to get your own Quip, and then you can see what a quadruple A battery looks like. Anyway, I love mine. I really do. Not just saying that because they support the show. If you've been thinking about getting one, give it a try. If you place an order, your first refill, which is 3 months after your initial order, they send you a new head every 3 months for it, and you can cancel at any time if you don't want to keep doing it. That your first head is going to be free, and it also includes like a little travel size toothpaste and a normal size toothpaste, and it's way cheaper than a lot of other electric toothbrushes out there too.
And who doesn't love free heads?
Boom. And with that,
Let's get back to speaking of apologies. We're going to need some of this
an apology for that joke.
Okay, so number 3 is making restitution.
Restitution.
This sounds so legal.
I know it does. Well, what does it mean, though?
So, for the people that value making restitution, that means that in order for an apology to be sincere, the person who is apologizing should justify their actions and also talk about what they're going to do to make it up to you, essentially. So asking things like, just straight up, what can I do to make it up to you? Or I'll compensate you. I mean, maybe that's weird in a romantic relationship, but it's like if a friend comes over and breaks something accidentally, that it's like, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I'll compensate you the cost of your precious moments collection. I don't know. That was the first thing that came to mind.
Yeah, that's great. I love it.
Or this is specifically what I'm going to do to make this right with you.
Right. Or asking, what can I do to make this right can also be part of it.
Exactly. So it's like demonstrating actual effort towards fixing things and fixing the relationship between the two of you.
I also wanted to take a moment right now to point out that in this quiz, it's not just focused on romantic relationships.
Right.
In fact, a minority of the questions actually specifically deal with a romantic relationship. And a lot of the questions are phrased as being about your mother or your father or brother or sister or a colleague or a coworker or something like that. That there's only a few that are about a spouse or a romantic partner. So these things are more universal than that. And again, so compensating someone for something really depends on
the context,
what that means.
Yeah.
So for example, in a romantic relationship, it could be something like, I'm so sorry I missed your birthday. Let me make it up to you by taking you away for a whole weekend.
Right.
Or, doing something to make up for that. Or in a work scenario, or again, if you broke something of someone else's, it could be monetary, or it could just be time or going out of your way to do something to restore that.
Right.
Restitution.
Okay. So moving on to the next one, which is genuinely repenting. And
yes.
I mean, repenting is such a dramatic verb to use. And I was honestly, when I looked at the list, I wasn't 100% sure. I was like, what actually is repenting, really? At least, what is repenting according to God-doctor Gary Chapman?
Right. So repenting is a very biblical term, and there is a lot of biblical language that's used in God-doctor Gary Chapman's writings, which is why he's named God-doctor Gary Chapman. Basically, what repenting means is that repenting for something doesn't just mean that you're sorry you got caught or that you're sorry someone got hurt for it, but that you're sorry and want to change your behavior, that you want to change yourself to do this. So, in Christian terminology, it's the idea of going to confession every week for the same thing in the Catholic Church and then continuing to do it is not repenting. And that repenting is, genuinely doing something to change yourself, to change this situation so it won't happen again.
So in practical terms, it could be saying something like, I'm going to do things differently in the future, or I know that I need to change this particular behavior, or I want to change this particular behavior, or these are the specific steps I'm going to take in order to change myself. So I guess it's not just apologizing for what happened, but it's also talking specifically about how I'm going to take action to make sure that this doesn't happen again in the future.
Right. And so the key difference here between some of the other ones, because like I said, all of them have this aspect of it won't happen again, as well as I'm genuinely sorry, that this one is more about taking specific steps. It could be asking the person to hold you accountable for not doing this thing again. It could look like...
It could be asking the person for help.
Exactly.
It could be like, I need your help to, so that I can change this behavior or this habit, and then we won't get hurt again in the future.
Right. And that's an interesting one too, because someone who values this apology language would hear that request for help of can you help me to do the right things to change and not do this again in the future? That to them, that will be really meaningful. And, oh, you're really genuinely interested in that. I appreciate that. Whereas to someone that doesn't value this language, that could be well, why don't you figure it out? I don't need to be the one fixing your problem, your mistake that you made. So it is interesting to see how the same thing could be interpreted very differently depending on your apology language.
Right.
And then our last one here is requesting forgiveness. So requesting forgiveness is telling your mate or your friend or your coworker that you want to see this relationship restored, that you want forgiveness. It's not just about fixing this problem, but that you want forgiveness and that you want this relationship to get back to a healthy place and back to a positive
it's kind of
place.
like when you come to someone and ask, can you forgive me? It's kind of a soft way of saying, like, do you still love me? Or do you still like me? Or can you still care for me? Or can you still love me eventually?
And this is a challenging one for people to do because asking for forgiveness is different from demanding forgiveness.
Right.
That asking for forgiveness makes it very clear in the asking that you don't have to. And it's scary because it carries with it a possibility of rejection.
Right.
Of saying, I know that you don't have to, and maybe I don't deserve it, or you need time to think about it, whether you could even consider it. But if you would forgive me, that would mean a lot to me. That's a pretty hugely vulnerable place to come from. And for people that this is their apology language, that's going to be hugely impactful.
Right.
And it's going to mean a lot to them.
Right. So as we mentioned at the top of this, we both took this assessment, and if you'll check in the show notes, you can find specifically where you can also go to take the apology language assessment, and it's on the same website where you can do the love language assessment. So you could just have a whole assessment party to yourself if you want to. So my breakdown is that basically you answer all these questions, and then it assigns a total of 20 points, kind of split up among these 5 different categories of apology. And mine, at the very top with 10 points, with half of the possible points you could get, is accepting responsibility. So that's clearly a thing for me, is for somebody to admit that they were wrong, or to admit the specific actions that they did that caused the hurt. And then we can move forward from there. Followed by, with only 5 points, expressing regret, and then restitution, and then repenting, and then I have a big fat 0 with requesting forgiveness.
Yeah, which is interesting too.
What's your breakdown?
Well, so my breakdown's a little bit different. That I had 2 that were both my highest, that had 8 and 7. So they were only 1 point apart, and that was making restitution, so trying to make things better, fixing it, and then expressing regret, which is that, to me, carries that sincere, I really do apologize for this, because if I could go back, I'd do it differently. I wouldn't just keep doing the same thing over and over again. For me, those are very close to each other. The interesting thing I found, though, taking this test, is that because I personally can't take any kind of assessment test without in the back of my mind trying to analyze it and like see how it's working, trying to figure out what this test is getting at. And what I noticed was my answers changed quite a bit when the question was about something personal. Like the example was someone forgetting an anniversary or, saying something that offended me or something like that. I answered those very differently and tended to go more with the expressing regret, whereas the ones that were professional, like someone screwed up and made you miss a deadline, or someone blamed you for a problem at work that was actually their fault, like those types of things, that to me, those I tended to answer more with making restitution of like, no, let's actually fix this. That to me, there's a distinction, at least in the way that I see those. So it's interesting that both of those results for me ended up fairly close to each other. And I'm curious if the questions were all more personal or all more work-based, if I would have skewed further one direction or the other.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's a really interesting insight for you, though, to know that in this
that
in
I have
the professional
a
sphere,
standard.
you have different things that you value versus in your personal life.
Yeah, definitely.
So you also have a big fat zero in request forgiveness.
I do,
is the other thing. So we have that in common. And I have a theory about this.
Okay.
And just hear me out. And because what it reminds me of is, so I was raised evangelical Christian. You were raised evangelical Christian.
Right. And various Christians.
Various Christian flavors.
Yes.
Something like that. And it reminds me of a friend of mine who's a writer now, and I read her blog, and we were raised in the same Christian church, and she wrote a really interesting article about the concept of forgiveness.
I feel like I remember you talking about this.
Yeah,
What was
her talking about how she also struggled with this idea, because she's no longer, I don't think she identifies as Christian anymore either, but her really struggling with the idea of people asking for forgiveness. And I think that it's because like in evangelical Christianity, like you're so beaten over the head with the concept of forgiveness. Constantly, it's like, oh, forgive each other, forgive each other, forgive each other. Like you need to forgive this person. Like you have to forgive this person and let it go. That kind of the same way that you were saying at the beginning of the episode, how the phrase "I'm sorry" has lost its weight. Maybe for us, the idea of asking for forgiveness has also lost its weight.
That's interesting.
Maybe. Because in her blog, she talked about the fact that, it just didn't make sense to her, the idea that when she was growing up in the Christian church, that people would be like, oh, well, somebody apologized, like you have to forgive them. That to her, it felt like saying that you're going to scale Everest and doing it in the same day. That for her, it was this learning process of like, oh, actual forgiveness takes a long time and can take a long time, that it's not just something that you can just like grant or not grant and it's a black and white switch, that it's a little bit more organic and may take more time.
I do want to point out though that in this apology language quiz there was one question in particular where the forgiveness answer did have that built into it, where it did say, and part of it was that I don't know if you will or if you can, and I understand if you don't, and I know it will take a lot of time, but I'm going to start doing what I can to rebuild trust, regardless of whether you forgive me or not.
Right.
And I think that is an important part to consider, because maybe this is a big deal for someone, but they do struggle with it because a lot of people are taught, like when you're kids and your sibling hurts you, you come tell your parents, the parents say you're sorry, they say I'm sorry, and it's like, well, okay, it's done.
Now it's done and you have to forgive them.
You just have to move on.
Yeah.
When it's just, they took my toy away and now they gave it back is one thing, as opposed to these kind of bigger things that could have longer lasting impacts on your trust for someone or on your professional life.
I wonder, maybe that is from some childhood conditioning, because like if we are conditioned as children to equate like, oh, once I say that I forgive my sister, then it's all done and it's off the hook and no one cares anymore.
Right.
And so maybe for some of us it's like, well, no, forgiveness is bullshit. Like it doesn't mean anything.
Right.
I'd rather actually see restitution or repentance.
But I could see that not being specifically Christian is what I'm getting
that makes
at,
sense.
though.
That makes sense.
It could also just be the way that we're taught to accept apologies as children.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
That all it should take is that I'm sorry. Whereas what to me, and again, mine being making restitution and expressing expressing regret as my highest ones, that the theme that I see in all of these is that they have an element of some kind of indication or guarantee that things will be different in the future.
Right.
That it's not just going to keep repeating, which I think is also relevant to that distrust of forgiveness because it implies that things could just go back
just
to
by
how
saying
they
you
were.
forgive them, then it's they get off scot-free or whatever.
I feel like we could do, whole psychoanalysis sessions with everyone on why they're, get to the bottom of why. But really what matters about this quiz is just getting some insights into what things matter for you.
Right.
And that perhaps understanding these things about yourself can help you to ask for the types of apologies that will really make you feel better and help you to move forward and restore your relationships. And then on the other hand is understanding this about a partner could also be, a very helpful thing in the way that you communicate with them, which is why did this.
Yeah, for instance, if a partner comes to you and maybe their strongest apology language is requesting forgiveness, and they come to you and ask for forgiveness, and if you are like us and have a big fat 0 in forgiveness, that to you, it's like, whatever, that's bullshit. I don't care. But if you know this about your partner, you can at least recognize, this carries a lot of weight for my partner, though.
Yeah,
and
for them to apologize in this way.
For them to come to me in this way, I understand that. And so, of course, again, like with everything, it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to solve all your problems, but it is a good tool to jumpstart a conversation between yourselves and your partners. About apologies and about what makes the most sense and what's going to be the most effective when it does come time for you to apologize for messing up.
Yeah. And that doesn't mean that just because you apologize the right way, it's going to fix it. There are sometimes things can't be fixed, unfortunately. Not to end on too much of a downer here.
Well, I was going to say your other alternative is just to not make a mistake ever again.
I see. And probably the best way to do that is to listen to all of our podcasts.
We can't give that guarantee. That's too much.
Yeah,
that's too much liability there.
Multiamory takes no responsibility for all the mistakes you're going to make.
That you make. Okay, are we bringing this home?
Yes.
Okay. If you would like to have your question or comment played on the show, if you want to call us up and share with us what your apology language is, you can call 678-MULTI 05.
Yeah.
Or you can send us a voice message on our Facebook page. You can also email us at info@multiamory.com, or you can send us a message on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. To support our show and to join our private Facebook community, you can go to patreon.com/multiamory. Multiamory is created and produced by Jase, Lindgren, Emily Matlack, and me, Dedeker Winston. Our episodes are edited by Mauricio. Our social media wizard is Will McMillan. Our theme song is Forms I Know I Did by Josh and Anand from the Fractal Cave EP.
Hey, this is Dan Savage from the Savage Lovecast and Savage Love. You're listening to a Swing Set podcast at Swing Set FM.